The war room lights flickered once, just once, as the grainy satellite feed locked onto a single figure sprinting across the moonlit Syrian desert, black fatigue shredded, blood streaking down her neck like war paint. She was dragging a wounded Delta operator by his plate carrier, firing her suppressed M4, one-handed behind her, dropping 2 ISIS fighters before they could raise their rifles. The Pentagon brass leaned forward in unison, breath fogging the glass. Then the radio crackled with a voice so calm it sounded bored. "Viper 6, this is Black Widow. Package secure. Send the bird." If you've ever wondered what silence sounds like when 30 hardened admirals forget how to breathe, subscribe right now, because this is the story of Captain Sarah Black Widow Kane, the Navy SEAL they tried to erase, and the night she made the most powerful men in uniform choke on their own joke. It started 3 days earlier in a classified briefing room beneath the Pentagon, the kind of place where the air smells like burnt coffee and fear. Rear Admiral James "Jimmy" Callahan, a legend in the teams with a chest full of fruit salad and a mouthful of Texas swagger, was running the slide deck on Operation Iron Veil. The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate an ISIS chemical weapons lab buried under the ruin of Palmyra, extract the scientist who'd built the sarin, and burn the facility to bedrock. The catch: the lab was ringed by 3 Russian PMCs, 2 Iranian Quds battalions, and a minefield the size of Delaware. Callahan clicked to the roster slide and grinned like a kid showing off a new shotgun. "Meet your infiltration element," he said. "Night stalkers on the birds, Delta on the ground, and because SecDef loves diversity quotas, 1 lone SEAL officer riding shotgun." The room tittered. Callahan zoomed in on the photo. A woman, early 30s, hair pulled back tight, eyes the color of glacier melt. Captain Sarah Kane, Naval Special Warfare Group 2, call sign GET. "This, Black Widow." Laughter rippled. Someone in the back muttered, "Hope she brought her web." Callahan slapped the table. "Easy, boys. She's here to observe. Probably wants to see how real men do it." The laughter swelled. Sarah sat in the shadows near the door, arms crossed, watching the room like a sniper watching wind. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Sarah Kane hadn't earned that call sign in a briefing room. She'd earned it in the Hindu Kush, age 26, when her ODA got ambushed in a village the map still called friendly. Taliban poured in from 3 sides. Her team leader took a PKM round through the neck, and the radio was bleeding static. Sarah low-crawled through a goat pen, slit the throat of a spotter with a broken bottle, then called in a danger-close JDAM on her own grid. The blast vaporized the enemy and half the village. When the dust settled, she was the only American still breathing, dragging 2 Afghans she'd never met to the LZ while humming Patsy Cline under her breath. The survivors started calling her Black Widow that night, half in awe, half in terror, because everything male within 50 meters seemed to die. The name stuck like shrapnel. Back in the Pentagon, the briefing wrapped and the brass filed out, still chuckling. Sarah lingered, studying the satellite overlays until the room emptied. Callahan clapped her shoulder on his way past. "Don't worry, darling. You just sit tight in the talk. We'll bring you back a souvenir." She met his eyes, voice soft as a scalpel. "Admiral, when was the last time you pulled a trigger in anger?" The grin faltered. He recovered fast. "Point is, Captain, this ain't a petting zoo. Stay in your lane." She nodded once, the kind of nod that ends conversations and sometimes careers. 48 hours later, the assault force launched from a blacked-out airfield in Jordan. 2 MHOT 37s skimmed the desert at 2 feet, rotors chopping moonlight into silver confetti. Sarah was supposed to be on the command bird, sipping coffee and relaying intel. Instead, she was strapped into the lead Chinook's door gun, cheek welded to an M240, scanning the darkness like it owed her money. The pilot, a warrant officer named Diaz, keyed the intercom. "Ma'am, you're supposed to be in the back." Sarah racked the volt. "Drive the bus, Chief. I'll handle customer service." They hit the LZ hot. Tracers stitched the night as the ramp dropped. Delta flowed out like wolves, but the PMCs were waiting. RPGs turned the second bird into a fireball before it touched sand. The radio screamed. Callahan's voice from the Tok, 3,000 miles away. "Abort. Repeat, abort." Sarah was already moving. She hit the ground running, boots splashing through irrigation ditches. The scientist's GPS beacon pulsing on her wrist, like a dying heartbeat. Delta's assault element was pinned in a Y, taking fire from a technical mounted with a DSHK. Sarah flanked left, alone, ghosting through the ruins of an ancient amphitheater. She counted 4 shooters on the technical, 1 reloading, 3 engaging. She dropped the loader with a suppressed headshot, then rolled a frag under the truck. The explosion flipped it like a toy. The remaining gunner spun toward the blast, and Sarah was already there, knife reversing in her grip, driving it up under the plate. She whispered, "Shh," as his eyes went wide. The scientist was cowering in a drainage culvert, babbling in Arabic. Sarah zip-tied his wrists, slung him over her shoulder like a sack of rice, and started the long haul back to the secondary LZ. That's when the feed went live in the Pentagon. The war room was packed now. Every screen showing drone footage, thermal, night vision, satellite. Callahan stood at the center console, face the color of wet ash. The Delta commander was bleeding out on the ground, calling for evac that wasn't coming. Russian Hind gunships were spooling up 5 clicks north. And there was Sarah, a lone heat signature dragging another, moving in calculated bursts, using terrain like a lover. Someone whispered, "That's the observer." Callahan didn't answer. He couldn't. Sarah's voice cut through the speakers again, calm, almost amused. "Viper 6, be advised, I have the package and 1 Y. Russians inbound. Request immediate Spectre." The air boss hesitated. AC-13 Ozos were committed elsewhere. Callahan slammed the console. "Negative, Black Widow, exfil is blown. Hunker down, we'll get you at dawn, static." Then Sarah laughed, actually laughed. "Copy Viper. Dawn's for people who like coffins. Black Widow out." What happened next became legend in the teams. The kind of story whispered in dive bars from Coronado to Dam Neck. Sarah carried the scientist and the wounded Delta operator 3 miles. Through enemy lines, stopping only to strip ammo from corpses. She hot-wired a technical, drove it straight into an Iranian checkpoint, and when the .50 cal jammed, she used the burning truck as cover to sprint the last kilometer to a dry riverbed. There, she rigged the scientist's laptop to a sat phone, uploaded the sarin formula to Langley, then triggered the self-destruct on the lab using code she'd memorized from the briefing. The explosion lit the horizon like a second sun. Russian Hinds circled but couldn't find her in the smoke. At 0400, a lone MH-6 Little Bird, piloted by a madman from the 160th who'd ignored orders, touched down in the riverbed. Sarah loaded her passengers, climbed aboard, and flipped the bird at the burning desert as they lifted off. The last thing the drone feed caught was her silhouette against the fire, hair whipping loose, middle finger raised like a battle standard. Back in the Pentagon, the war room was a tomb. The screens showed the little bird banking west, rotor wash scattering embers. Callahan stared at the frozen image of Sarah's salute, his own joke echoing in his skull. The SecDef cleared his throat. "Admiral, get Captain Kane on a secure line. I want her in this room in 12 hours. Callahan's voice was hoarse. "Yes, sir." The room started to empty, generals avoiding eye contact. Sarah's voice crackled one final time over the open channel, so soft only. The mic caught it. "Tell the Admiral his souvenir's in the mail." 12 hours later, Sarah walked into the Pentagon wearing blood-spattered camis and a grin sharp enough to shave with. The scientist was in debrief, the Delta operator in surgery, the sarin formula locked in a vault. Callahan met her in the corridor, hat in hand. "Captain Sarah, I was out of line." She studied him for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a blackened ISIS patch, still warm. "Souvenir," she said, pressing it into his palm. "Next time you brief a room, remember every call sign has a body count." "Mine's just higher." She brushed past him, boots echoing like gunshots. Behind her, the war room doors swung shut, and for the first time in 30 years, Admiral James Callahan didn't know what to say. The aftermath rippled through the community like a shockwave. Sarah's promotion to commander was fast-tracked, her file sealed tighter than a drum. The team started telling new jokes, ones where Black Widow was the punchline and the setup. Female candidates at Bud S painted tiny black spiders on their rucks. Russian PMCs put a bounty on her head so high it came with its own PowerPoint. And somewhere in a quiet bar in Virginia Beach, Sarah Kane raised a glass of bourbon too. The memory of the men who'd laughed, then toasted the ones who hadn't made it home. She never explained the call sign again. She didn't need to. The desert had done it for her. Years later, when young ensigns asked her what it felt like to make a room full of Admiral Swallow. Their pride, Sarah would smile that glacier smile and say, "It felt like justice, kid. Cold, slow, and inevitable." Then she'd finish her drink, shoulder her pack, and disappear into whatever shadow needed killing next, because some widows don't wear black for mourning. They wear it for work. From which part of the country are you watching this video?